Alright, so I'm going to ask you guys to do something for me before I start my presentation. I want you all to close your eyes and think about a time where you're having a really bad day. Think about what was going on in the situation. How are you feeling? How are you acting? What were you saying to people? How many of you wish someone had asked you, are you okay? Okay. Now, bad days like this come often when you are a teenager like we all are. And especially for teenage girls, for the girls who are in this room. But the problem with bad days is even though sometimes it can just feel like, just a bad days can become bad months and become bad years. And then if unresolved, can become lifelong problems. And that's sort of what I'm going to address in my project and in my presentation today. I'm going to be talking about what's happening to teens today, specifically girls, and I'll get into why I made that decision. I'm also going to be talking about why there's a disconnection between teens and the adults in their lives. And then the last point that I'm going to make is what I'm planning on doing about it. So what is happening to teens? What is happening to teens? So this is common knowledge for a lot of people, but our frontal lobes are still developing, and this is the part of the brain where you have feelings and it controls your behaviors and it controls your decisions, and that's why sometimes we make bad decisions or sometimes we have erratic behavior. We also are experiencing hormone changes. But also during adolescence, we have a whole new realm of pressures. We have family pressures, social pressures, academic pressures, and for some people you have money pressures and countless other pressures that sort of play into our mood and also the decisions that we make and our performance in school and in life in general. And I chose to work with girls specifically with my project because statistically during adolescence girls have a greater drop of self-esteem, and they also, when faced with difficulty, tend to internalize their problems, implode, and don't seek out for help. And this is kind of an issue, especially because biologically our hormones, specifically estrogen, are causing a fluctuation in serotonin, which is a neurotransmitter, and that fluctuation can lead to things like depression if gone unmonitored. And the CDC released this report in 2015 about suicide, and it showed that when asked people from grades 9 through 12 in an anonymous survey that 22.4% of female students said that they seriously considered committing suicide within the past 12 months, which was double that of boys. And 10.6% of female students had tried either once or more than once to commit suicide, and that was also double of boys. And this kind of shows that teens are struggling in general. This is a problem with America and with the world, but girls are really having the hardest time during adolescence. So why is there a disconnect between girls and the adults in their lives? Well, girls, when they're going through adolescence, are incredibly sensitive. This has a lot to do with hormonal changes and things like that, but they also are weird with tone and body language, and they're not quick to trust adults. So they have a hard time reaching out when they're struggling. But also, adolescents in general are sort of going through the psychological phenomena of, flying out of the nest. And you're pulling yourself away from your parents, your teachers, the adults in your lives, because you're trying to become autonomous and you're trying to make your own decisions. But sometimes when you're faced with difficulty, you might not know what to do. And oftentimes, more than not, you do the wrong thing. And that's why we need to sort of bring in the adult piece. And adults tend not to reach out to girls especially because girls are seen, and this is sort of stigmatized, as dramatic and as hormonal and as sort of dangerous to get involved with because you never know exactly what they're feeling and they're unpredictable. But the problem with that is that then girls aren't getting the attention they need from the adults in their lives. And teachers also fear to be, invasive in their privacy, and they don't want to come off as sort of just trying to get into their business and or making more of a problem out of something that isn't there. So this is where I kind of brought my project into play, and this is what I plan to do, is bridge the gap between adolescent girls and the adults in their lives. And I'm going to be trying to find out what is the state of teens right now and how they feel about the relationships with their adults. So I'm surveying girls within this school and other schools, just trying to get a feel of how do people feel about where they're supported, where they're not, finding patterns and possibly solutions, because sometimes people will feel supported, but where are they feeling supported? And how can I implement that type of support with the people that aren't feeling supported? I'm also going to be doing one-on-one filmed interviews with today's adolescents and other past adolescent girls who had a struggle and either had a lack of or had the involvement of an adult in their life, and that made a difference. And seeing how that impact affected their life in the long run, and as well as seeing the patterns with that, because then I can also apply that. Then this is all going to live on a website that's going to act as a resource for, specifically for adults that work with teenage girls, and hoping that by them sort of having this understanding of what's happening to adolescent girls, they'll cultivate a more supportive environment. And if there's a more supportive environment, more people will come forward when they're struggling. Questions?
Do you think this sort of help would be so specific towards adolescent girls that it would be impossible to have it? Would someone who found this resource and say, oh, this is a great resource, unfortunately I've got a teenage boy, would they still find it helpful, or is it so specific?
I would argue yes. Okay. Because I think just generally being aware of the fact that you're not being attentive toward the students or towards your child or toward the kid on your team. And I think in regards to boys, there are separate issues with that, and I specifically kind of decided not to go into that, one based off of data, and also because I want this to be focused and I want the results to be the best that they can be. So I'm hoping that would be helpful for those people, but I can't promise that my resources will directly apply to people working with adolescent boys.
So I saw that you started with the Real Deal Girls Project or something like that. Is that in any way connected to this at all?
No, that specifically works with how girls react to social media. Okay. Yeah. Any other questions? Okay. So I want to leave you with this, and I mentioned this question when I first started my presentation. I know it seems simple, but I think there's a lot of power behind this question, and I think it has two parts. It takes someone to ask it and someone to answer it. And for the adults in this room, I think that you have to be more attentive. Ask this question and don't be afraid to ask this question. There's no harm that is going to be done by asking, are you okay? And the students in this room, when you're asked that question, be honest. You're only helping yourself. And the asking and answering this question can actually be life-changing. Thank you.